Hi, this is Jeff Koper, and we welcome you to Disney Insights. Thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to talk about Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, which makes its return after a lengthy remodel. It has been well executed and it's as fun as ever, though perhaps in a slightly less bumpy way, at least for the moment. We'll cover not only the history of this mountain, but of its sister mountains at Disneyland, Tokyo Disneyland, and Disneyland Paris. My business partner, Mark David Jones, joins me to discuss the original opening of Big Thunder here at Magic Kingdom, where he was part of the opening crew back in 1980. He emphasizes how the attraction was a starting point for massive changes that would emerge at Walt Disney World in the years that followed, making it the resort destination of the world. And of course, I'll give you my play-by-play review of the attraction in its refurbished state. So join us as Big Thunder Mountain Railroad returns. This podcast is produced by myself and Performance Journeys, which offers training, development, and consultant support to organizations big and small and to entrepreneurs new and established. With a wide variety of resources and long-time in-the-trench experience, we offer keynotes, workshops, online learning, coaching, and more to organizations that want to build their teams, improve organizational excellence, develop leadership, and create customer loyalty. So check us out at performancejourneys.com. As with our podcast, be sure to check out our website, disneyinsights.com, where we offer key points, photos, videos, links, and more. Note that our YouTube carries our podcast, so please subscribe to the Disney Insights YouTube page, as it will be more a part of our social media strategy moving forward. And by the way, we also have an actual play-by-play of Big Thunder Mountain that you can watch and enjoy. So with all this, we encourage and appreciate any positive ratings, reviews, or referrals you can offer. Let's first talk about the history of this mountain. To understand Big Thunder Mountain at Magic Kingdom is to first understand something called the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train, which opened in 1956 in Frontierland at Disneyland. There were already Conestoga wagons and pack mules that kind of ran through this territory in Frontierland, but there wasn't much to see, and the wagons were having some difficulty. Probably because of the horses. The train was brought in to better handle the number of guests, and it was called a train so as to not confuse it with the Disneyland Santa Fe Railroad, which circled the park. In 1960, Mark Davis was asked to see if there could be some improvements made to this casual train ride through forests and deserts. Retitled The Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, Mark Davis added humor to the experience with some 200 audio animatronics creatures, from reptiles and birds to beavers and bears. But with waterfalls and the ever-enchanting Rainbow Caverns, a sort of fluorescent, glow-in-the-dark set of fountains, it was still just a ride. And it was not nearly as exciting as a roller coaster such as the kind that had been built in 1959 with the Matterhorn. So therefore, the attendance wasn't so great. In the late 1960s, Imagineer Claude Coates had brought on a Disneyland ice cream scooper by the name of Tony Baxter to help support the building of Fantasyland in the Magic Kingdom when Walt Disney World opened in 1971. He did a number of things involving 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and also kind of looking at that fluorescent aspect that was in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. That park, when it opened in 1971, had attractions known to Disneyland like It's a Small World and Haunted Mansion. But it didn't have a Pirates of the Caribbean. That's because the same Imagineer, Mark Davis, who improved the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train, had a bigger idea in mind, taking a train experience like the Rainbow Caverns and the Mine Train ride at Disneyland, and a boat ride like Pirates of the Caribbean, and meshing the two together where they would create what would be known as Big Thunder Mesa, which would not only include a boat ride known as the Western River Expedition, but would also have, again, a train kind of weaving through it. Roy Disney loved the concept, but felt it should be phase 2 of the Magic Kingdom after they were trying to, get their costs in line when they were trying to first open. So after Walt Disney World opened, Tony Baxter joined Mark Davis in kind of working along that project and creating a model alongside Mark Davis. But there were several issues that came to the surface in the early 1970s after the Magic Kingdom opened. This included an oil crisis. Money was tighter at Walt Disney Productions, so they had to kind of take a big look at what projects they were working on, and they did a big review. Mind you, Roy O. Disney, who loved the concept, had passed on. And while the Thunder Mesa project was impressive, Tony didn't like how the train kind of wove through the mountain. It was still more of the speed of the former mine train than that of the speed of a bobsled. Tony was actually invited to do his own independent version of a runaway mine train ride. This would be Tony's first big project. He worked on several versions of the attraction to get it just right. It also didn't help, by the way, that in the wake of this oil crisis, it was decided to add more affordably a version of Pirates of the Caribbean to Magic Kingdom, which made it seemingly less necessary for a Western River expedition. When the park had opened, there seemed to be a number of guests who knew something about pirates or had seen Walt Disney talk about it on his television show, and they were like, "Where is Pirates?" And so the thought was, it's a lot easier to replicate some version of Pirates of the Caribbean than it is to start on an entirely different project. So that kind of brought down the whole total Thunder Mesa project. But in the 1970s, after the success of Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom, and of course the earlier Matterhorn bobsleds, there was a feeling that more roller coasters could mean bigger attendance for Disneyland. Nearby theme parks were certainly offering more thrills to younger visitors. Magic Mountain had opened up with the Revolution and other big roller coaster rides. Even Knott's Berry Farm had its own corkscrew type roller coaster, and it was popular. The mine train through nature's wonderland, that casual rail ride through forests and deserts, it had dropped off significantly in attendance during this period. By the way, I will say, I was one who rode it all the time. It was an e-ticket attraction and certainly worth it. Maybe it dropped down to a D ticket toward the end, but I loved it. I enjoyed it. There were so many sights, and going through the rainbow caverns at the end was just plain cool. It was really fun. But again, by and large, most people weren't going on this attraction. The attendance had gone down. And by the way, by this time, the pack mules were coming to an end of its trek, and the little town of Rainbow Ridge, which was located at the entrance to Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, it started to feel more like a ghost town back at Disneyland. So with that attendance drying up, Tony was asked if that train ride concept they had worked on for Magic Kingdom could be placed in Disneyland rather than Magic Kingdom. Tony's focus moved back to the West Coast, where he found a way to fit the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad concept in by literally flipping its footprint. With this, he added a smaller mountainscape in the form of something that looks more like Bryce Canyon, Utah, to the mountain. And on September of 1979, it opened to the public. It was an instant success. In fact, what I remember was, of course, I'm going to miss the mine train, but in May of 79, just 3 months before, 4 months or so before it opened, I have gone to grad night, living in Phoenix. We'd gone to grad night overnight, and I remember stepping in front of this thing that had been built, this big mountain and its whole look and feel, and thinking, Wow, this is going to be something. This is going to be something amazing. Still, some of the magic of Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland was kept. First off, the guest queue just below the little town of Rainbow Ridge, which was refashioned for the attraction, but with all of its charm, it had a very interesting scale. It was not the scale what you would find on Main Street, and it wasn't the scale of storybook canal boats. It was kind of this much smaller scale, but it still suggested that this little town had an identity, and it was the home for where Big Thunder Mountain would be built at Disneyland. And during the ascent, you would see the mud pots and stalactites. They would frame a sort of rainbow caverns, not quite as dramatic as Cloud Coat's version, but still part of the magic of the new attraction. And then, of course, there was, well, the roller coaster aspect, which just made it fun. And quickly, everybody learned the expression, hold on to your hats and glasses, because this here is the wildest ride in the wilderness. It opened successfully, and since then, 3 other mountains have been built. The second of these, after Disneyland, was Magic Kingdom. And again, this version is a flip of the track from Disneyland. Still, it sits on what seems to be a larger piece of property, as there is much more space. The mountainscape is more like Monument Valley, which overlaps Utah and Arizona. Instead of Rainbow Ridge, you kind of go through the little town of Tumbleweed as you kind of quickly go through a little portion where things have flooded over quite nicely. Then there was Tokyo Disneyland, which was built a few years later. Magic Kingdom opened in 1980 on November 15th. Tokyo Disney opened on July 4th, go figure, of 1987. It wasn't built in Frontierland because there was no Frontierland. Instead, it was built in Western Land, which is the expression they use for Frontierland. But it has a Big Thunder Mountain, slightly more compressed for the space it's in, but similar in look and style to the one at Magic Kingdom. The big difference here is that the last turn goes right instead of left, turning into a cave with a more high-speed finish. It's probably considered the best hybrid of the Disneyland and Magic Kingdom versions. And it kind of sits at the end of the street, just before you get to what is their Rivers of America, that version right there. The 4th mountain is at Disneyland Paris. This one is the most unique of all coasters in that the ride is boarded along the rivers of the far west, but then speeds underneath the river to an island, which would have been like Tom Sawyer Island, where it goes through 3 lift hills and then roars back under the river to the boarding area. So there's no Tom Sawyer's Island. There's a pirate's island kind of in Adventureland, which we've talked about before. But here, that entire island is dedicated to Big Thunder Mountain. And it's very, very cool. And probably the reason it's cool is because, well, a couple of things. First off, the ride has a bigger anticipation to it in jettisoning out to the island and coming back underneath in the cave underneath the island, returning back to the shore. It really hustles and moves, and it feels wilder. And that's one of the problems with the first 2 Big Thunders, is that the first lift delivers when you head on down. The second lift delivers even better, but the third lift never really quite gets that energy. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we review the one at Magic Kingdom. Notwithstanding, the other thing that really kind of sets Disneyland Paris apart is its story. It's a story that encompasses all of Frontierland there. It's a story about the Ravenswood family, and it's tied to their version of the Haunted Mansion and this bride that, her father did not want to see the bride get married. And so there's this whole feeling and mystery that is spread throughout all of Frontierland that has kind of made the whole thing kind of a ghost town of its own. And it all plays out, and the mining operation is part of the Ravenswood family and so forth. And so there's a lot of story that plays throughout. It's just a really very cool attraction, and it's the only attraction that actually opened with the park back in 1992 on April 12th when Euro Disneyland, or Disneyland Paris as we know today, actually first opened. So all of it is, all four mountains are very cool, very unique, and really wonderful. That said, let's talk a little bit more about, and by the way, I just to let you know, the video, if you go to DisneyInsights.com, will show you the differences in the four mountain experiences. So if you go to our DisneyInsights.com, you'll see a link to that comparison of the four mountains. Pivotal is the fact that they all kind of learn from each other, and they've all been created to meet not only the design needs of their parks, but of the guests as well. So these mountains are universally loved, whichever park you go to. My business partner, Mark David Jones, had a 28-year history with Walt Disney World, to include opening Big Thunder Mountain. So we're going to hear from him about his experience, which began even before Big Thunder opened, and how this attraction was a stepping off point for Walt Disney World as it moved into the 1980s with Epcot and with enormous growth. So without further ado, let's join Mark David Jones. All right, I have the opportunity to be with my partner in crime, Mark David Jones, who we have been doing business together for a couple of decades, particularly with our organization, World Class Benchmarking. And I am really glad to have him share his experience, because it's an enlightenment few people have. And so just glad to have you with us, Mark.
Well, glad to be here. And I know we're going back, way back, as far as Big Thunder Mountain. This goes back to 1980 when I was involved in that rollout and the pre work on that. So
yeah, let's roll back
down memory lane.
Yeah, let's roll back a little bit on that. I think you came on board to Walt Disney World at around 78. Is that right?
Yes.
And
yep.
You were largely in kind of an entertainment role prior. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in, but I started out actually in 78. I started out in Frontierland operations.
Oh, did you really? So tell us that little pathway there. What were you doing in Frontierland operations?
Working on the rivers of America. I was doing the canoes and the keel boats and a little bit of parade crowd control. And that's where, that was the summer of 78. And then when I was in parade
Okay. Well, hold on. We cannot leave this without you proving that you were truly with the keelboats by giving the initial keelboat spiel that was expected on the attraction. So come on, you got to do it for me, Mark.
Okay. And actually, there's an interesting story about that spiel.
Please.
But as I recall, I mean, we're going back 40-something years. Gosh, it is. Well, howdy, all you pioneers, engineers, mutineers, mouseketeers, moths, paws, grandmas, grandpas, in-laws, outlaws, guitar pluckers, banjo pickers, chicken pluckers, and nose pickers, and a special howdy to all you pretty gals. So I can't believe my mouth still makes all those noises. That's crazy. But you know, one interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is that originally, or something similar to that, originally was at the Diamond Horseshoe.
Okay.
There was this person out in front of the Diamond Horseshoe that used to do this little patter kind of a thing, trying to get people to come on in and check the place out, all that, kind of like a little barker kind of a thing. And then I think he either left, quit, or I don't know what, something happened where he went away. And then there wasn't this person doing this. The person that was welcoming people didn't do this pattern. And somebody on the team, I think it was with keel boats, might have started um, uh, they said, we should do something like that. And we kind of played around, or they were playing around with it. I was kind of on the sidelines on this, but they played around with it, and they decided just to do, since this guy's not there anymore, let's just do that. And so we did a similar, I think it's a little bit different than the Diamond Horseshoe version, but that ended up being what we used to kind of have fun with. We had a lot back then in the late 70s. We had a lot of latitude. We kind of saw ourselves as the Frontierland version of Jungle Cruise. So we would, even though we didn't have a script like Jungle Cruise, we got a chance to kind of play and improv and just have some fun on the river there.
And you were doing canoes too, weren't you, during that time?
Yeah, canoes and keelboats. And then
and you told me that was miserable wearing those Davy Crockett hats.
Oh my gosh, the coonskin hats, and you're out there in the blazing sun in the middle of summer. It was just brutal. But we'd splash. We'd incite the guests to splash start splashing just to get cool with the river water, which was nasty. But we were kids. But how I got to Big Thunder Mountain was I was in parade doing parade crowd control. I mean, back then everybody was doing a lot of different things. And for extra money, I was doing overtime shifts with parade crowd control, and then I met up with some people in the parade. And so for Christmas in '78, I started doing characters. I started doing the parade after talking to that supervisor, and then I was doing the character department. And then in 1980, as they were ramping up with Big Thunder, my former supervisor saw me, said, "Hey, could you help us with this Big Thunder opening?" And so I was working double shifts again. I was, working with character department, and then when I wasn't there, I would go down, throw on, Big Thunder clothes, head over there, and we were kind of helping ramp things up at the end of, that was 1980.
Right, November 15th is when it officially opened. What do you remember of that? Because Disney had been operating Space Mountain as a coaster, so it's not like they'd never done a coaster before. But this was, its unique creature. Do you remember anything particular about the operation of that train?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, keep in mind, again, going back to 1980, Frontierland, this was a big shift because all of Frontierland basically was low tech, except for like the Country Bear Jamboree animatronics. There really wasn't a whole lot. We kind of prided ourselves in this kind of, they keeping it simple, like the frontier. Everything was, so there was that going on. And here we had this, what at the time at least they were saying was the most complicated roller coaster they had done, was Big Thunder Mountain. I mean, it was, I think, and again, when you asked me to kind of do this, I was starting to brush the cobwebs out of my head about this experience, and there were a handful of key memories about it. One of which was that in talking with some of the Imagineers back then, it was one of the most complicated roller coasters Disney had created. And it was one of the first, I think he mentioned it was one of the first CAD, like computer
drawing.
Yeah, one of the computer, it was one of the early ones to use that. There were these magnets for some reason. I don't remember exactly what the deal was with the magnets.
Yeah, the magnets are the things that take you out of the gate and drag you toward then the lift mechanism.
Well,
in the first gate.
All I know is it was a lot of very fine-tuned coordination between all these moving parts, and that's that complication. And again, Disney likes to try new things, and back in the day, it was always innovation. What can we do differently and better? So there was a lot of that going. But because there were so many things new things, it became uh, it was so complicated that it became easy for things to break. Like any part of that interconnected chain, if any part of it broke, the whole thing came down. And so there was we were down a lot. There were a lot of effects that we started out with that went away early because they just didn't work. Like the bats, I remember the bats they had these bats that were on wires that would come out, and that probably within a month that went away. There was all these smoke and steam effects that were part of that early piece. So it was very complicated, a lot of moving parts working together at one time. And again, when any one thing slipped, it shut it down.
Were you able to, when things came to a halt, were you having to do a lot of walking all the guests out, or were they having to stay there until things were reset on the computer? Or was it a mix of that? What was the experience of?
Well, it went through phases. At the beginning, it was, and I think partly because when it was testing and adjusting over and over, and they had us, we were in there riding it, and then as it was breaking, or breaking down people. And at first, I remember we would keep people on the ride thinking, well, we can fix this. We've been fixing it in the run-up to launch. And so we would keep people there, and we had to kind of stand there and make sure they weren't getting out of the ride vehicle, that kind of stuff. And then for some reason, as soon as we did the launch, it started taking longer to fix some of these things. So it then it evolved to, as soon as it broke, it's like, okay, get off. It's probably going to be a while.
Yeah. I imagine you dealt with a lot of guests who were really excited and really frustrated.
Oh, yeah. Especially, the big Disney fans, they're the ones that want to get, they're the ones lining up first. And so they're the ones that have the highest, it's very intense. They have the highest expectation, but it's also just the excitement of being there on the first day, or whatever it was, first month. This is the new attraction, hadn't been, and I flew down to Florida to check this out. But it was a lot of in fact, speaking of technical stuff, I remember one of the things that they had to do is, because they were using this computer assisted kind of design, the ride was initially too smooth. They kept arguing about, this is supposed to be like this rickety mine train. And Imagineering people were having a lot of angst about, they had to go back and program in some of the, the bumps and jolts and all the stuff to make it seem kind of scary. Oh my gosh, this thing's going to come off the track, kind of a feel to it.
Interesting. Interesting, because that's playing out right now in this new revision. People are riding it and they're feeling like, wow, this is much smoother. And then some are saying, kind of missed the old, felt like, everything was falling apart kind of feel. So it's an interesting balance point. You have to kind of play between the two.
Oh yeah, and I remember too that after we opened, it was a little cooler. What was that, November? You said?
Yeah.
It was run up to Christmas. Yeah, and I remember later on, this is after I pulled away from the project, because remember, Epcot was getting built. There's a whole lot of other things going on when this happened.
Yeah.
So, but the Florida heat in the summer, they had these. What were they called? Friction-based braking systems?
Yes.
The brakes, they were constantly overheating and seizing up in the summer. That was another thing that happened 6 months later on. They were realizing, there's all this going on. But there was a lot of other things going on when this happened. Right after the launch of Big Thunder, all of those Imagineers, all of those construction people that were a part of that project, suddenly were shifted over to Epcot, which I think at the time they were saying that it was the largest construction project in the world.
Yeah.
They had like 10,000 workers were on site. I mean, it was this huge thing, and it was like a ghost town. It was hard to get Imagineers to come over to Big Thunder, But at the same time, they had. I remember that was at all the stuff that happened at the same time. There was the Joe Fowler, the big the riverboat.
Yes.
That accident happened right around the time we opened Big Thunder Mountain, and basically, I don't know if
it was taken out for updating renovation, and I think it fell apart at the dry dock, didn't it?
Yeah, because it was made up of the wood. It was basically a wood
structure
boat,
mm-hmm.
and wood and metal, and it wasn't it wasn't supported correctly. The way they strapped it up, or they went to pull it up and put it in the dry dock, it wasn't strapped correctly, and it basically caved in on itself, and it broke the frame, and they couldn't repair it.
What I've come to understand is that they decided, rather than do a rebuild, which they could have done, although again going back to the Epcot, because it wasn't just Epcot being built, they also had right at the heels of that Tokyo Disney, and so they decided to take all the good stuff off that boat and put it onto the boat for Tokyo Disneyland.
And then the Centennial Parade was pulling up. That's why I went back to entertainment.
Yeah,
because Centennial was happening, and that was a logistical nightmare. With that, they had this one birthday cake float. It was just, I don't know. The rumor was that they designed it using metric system, and then when it got, I don't know, but it was too big. Basically, we couldn't get around the corners of Liberty Square into Frontierland. It was just almost impossible.
It was a cake float.
Yeah, giant cake float.
How funny.
So, and we couldn't take it out because it was Centennial. It was supposed to be this birthday celebration kind of a thing.
How funny.
But all that happened with Big Thunder. So there was a lot going on. It was very complicated. A lot of delays, a lot of, going 101, as they say, inoperable kind of a thing. But a lot of interesting, and it was kind of cool to be part of that. And, with everything that was going on, it was kind of it was kind of like the launch of a lot of growth at Disney at the time.
Wow, that's a good way of phrasing that. And you and I, you've had the opportunity to do Big Thunder Mountain at Disneyland Paris, at Tokyo Disney, and yet I guess you'd agree that there's nothing quite like home. When you tell me how Walt Disney World compares to all of those other Big Thunders.
Well, gosh, like you said, I think the sentimental piece. There's always been a word war about which is better, Disneyland or Disney World, and I think it just depends on where you were raised. I guess for me, I've always liked Disney World better, and I know you were a Disneyland dude.
Yeah.
Back in the day, so I suspect you prefer Disneyland over Disney World. Yeah. So it's it's kind of hard to say. The rides are different. In fact, you know what? You bring up something that I hadn't thought of in a long time. I believe, if I remember correctly, the Big Thunder at Disney World, it was being designed for Disney World, and for some reason Disneyland uh,
Got it
launched,
first.
got it first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
And
got it
so,
first because they had been ignored for so long, and because yeah, and I'll share that longer history with everyone, but yeah, Disneyland, and it's really a flip of the track. Um,
yeah. And that was one of the complications because at Disney World, because they had to make it different than Disneyland, they didn't want to just have it be a rubber stamp kind of a thing. They expanded it and they did make some changes, and those changes created problems, and
hmm.
that fed into the whole huge amount of testing and just. I mean, when I went over there to help, the supervisor told me, "Yeah, we just need you for like a couple weeks," and I was there for 2 months getting that thing ramped up.
Wow.
And then launch. I mean, I stayed after the official launch because they kept having problems. Um, but yeah, that was the whole drama.
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate you sharing times from the old west with us.
Yeah,
Appreciate it
appreciate
so
the
much.
trip down memory lane. I appreciate you asking, and it's been nice, kind of thinking back 45 years. It's been quite a while to that era, but yeah, fun time.
Cool. Thanks. My thanks again to my partner and friend, Mark David Jones, for spending the time to talk about his experience. Mark and I have done programs across the world from Shanghai to California to Disneyland Paris, and especially at Walt Disney World. We were formerly with Disney Institute and showcased to organizations big and small about best practices at Disney and how they can relate to your own organizational challenges. And so we've had a lot of fun doing that. And if you get a chance, check out, I talk about performance journeys a lot, but my other company that we share together is worldclassbenchmarking.com, and you can check that out as well. So, any rate, let me talk about my experience visiting finally Big Thunder Mountain. I'd hoped to get there sooner, but because of my schedule and clients and so forth, and weather and a couple other things, and downtimes. There have been a couple of downtimes for Big Thunder over the last over the last week or so. And you can see the entire entry queue and attraction. There's a link on DisneyInsights.com if you want to see the whole flow of the attraction now. The first thing you're going to notice that's very, very clear is that there's a lot of construction all around. First off, of course, the rivers of America, the former rivers of America, are closed, along with Tom Sawyer Island. They've inserted a lot of concrete linings, which I would assume is part of those mountain or hill aspects of the attraction that are going to go into the experience. Those are starting to circle in different places around the island. If you look across to the Haunted Mansion, which has a tarp on it, and its facade is being fixed and improved, you'll recall that when you were on the Liberty Bell, you would come around a big river bend before you'd see the Haunted Mansion and come into dock. Well, that river bend is being kind of shortened. They're being kind of compressed so as to allow guests that are going to go to the Villain's Land to kind of go right by the Haunted Mansion and then move kind of further on to that themed area. And then the thing that I think is the most surprising is, and I've alluded to it a couple of times in the podcast, but when they first talked about doing something in this area of the park, they first called it Beyond Big Thunder. And the Beyond Big Thunder seemed to be just that, Beyond Big Thunder Mountain, kind of beyond the train tracks and so forth. When you are at certain vantage points, you see the degree of construction and flattening that has gone into those areas out there. There's a whole lot of space, and there's a whole lot of rumors as to what that space might be. Could it include new attractions? Could it include a new hotel that would literally be at the doorstep of Magic Kingdom? we have no announcement. It's only rumors as to what might come into that space. But believe me, there is actually a Beyond Big Thunder, and that's Beyond Big Thunder and Beyond Rivers of America, and beyond the train tracks of the Walt Disney World Railroad. So when you are actually at Big Thunder, you probably get about 220 degrees of construction all around you. To that extent, they've put in a great deal of fencing around the mountain until construction is completed. That kind of helps you stay within the theme. It doesn't hurt for sure, but don't miss it. There is a lot of construction going around Big Thunder Mountain, and I've got some photos of that you may want to take a look at when you get a chance on DisneyInsights.com. One of the interesting things to have occurred is that the height requirement for this attraction, which has been 40 inches, still is 40 inches out of Disneyland, has now been moved to 38 inches. I haven't heard a really perfect explanation. I think it's probably a number of things which have occurred that may have allowed them to go to that height requirement. I don't know exactly how you... Of course, the train has been refurbished. Maybe that adds some element. The lift bars, how well they are able to come down and so forth. Not sure. But at any rate, the good news is if you're looking to get your child on board, you may be able to get them on board sooner at 38 inches. As you step into the queue of the attraction, everything has been addressed and fixed up and freshened and repainted. As you approach the building, the smokestack has smoke coming out of it, which I don't remember how long ago that was happening. There are a number of water elements all in place. They're not all run. Those water elements exist. I even saw them in play before the attraction opened up, but they're not all completed because they kind of will ultimately kind of come through into what the construction is currently building. But as you go up the mountain toward the building, the ride show building, not the ride show building, but the attraction queue building, you see the infamous Clarksdale wagon. The Clarksdale wagon actually is a nod to the Apple Dumpling Gang, which was a film back in the 1970s with Tim Conway and Don Knotts. And that you see the words to the Clarksdale wagon there. You notice there had been over time, and I've always assumed these are fireworks shells that have kind of gone up into the sky and then somehow have flown down into this area of the park. But you used to see them all scattered throughout the desert. You'd see these little gray shells. All of that has been removed. Don't know if there aren't more to come as fireworks shows continue. There were a number of interactive elements that I believe were added back in 2012. They all seem to be functioning. They seem to be working really well. They seem to be coming up and running. I don't think every one of them is perfect yet, but there are still interactive elements in place. And in fact, the story is very much in play. And it's just really all adding to the experience as you go on the attraction. There is a new track that has been put in place. That's what has taken the most time during this rehab. And as I mentioned earlier, the trains have been completely refurbished. Now those two things combined, maybe some software additions, we kind of talked about that with Mark, how it affected the ride experience. For me, and I think from others I've heard from, you feel a much smoother experience riding the attraction. I don't know that that's going to always be the case, or if it's over time going to change a little, but it didn't bother me. I enjoyed it, and in fact, the older you get, you kind of need a few less bumps and bruises along the way. The Matterhorn is certainly one of those attractions I have kind of retired from because it's just a little too much on the bumpy side. Then you get on board the trains and you head on to the ride. Hold on to your hats and glasses. Well, you move into what was the cavern scene, which has been very much reimagined for this attraction. First off, you head in and you kind of make a left and you kind of go through this area, and it was just dark. You really couldn't see much of anything. Now there are little props and little kind of signage and little moments as you kind of go through the initial part to kind of say, okay, this is where you're at and where we're going. And then you come into the space where there are bats everywhere. Now, there's always been bats in the cavern scene. They look like little things hanging from string off of the ceiling and kind of whirled around. They weren't very impressive as elements. These bats aren't moving as much as they are hanging. And if you were to take a look at it, and I've got a picture from Disney, because it's really hard to get onto. I look forward to going back on this attraction at night, because your eyes readjust. I think you're going to see even more so this bat element, but there are hundreds of bats that have been added to it, and it has a great eerie sense to it. And then as you move into the lift hill, you have what has been referred to as the Rainbow Caverns. Now, it's not the Rainbow Caverns in the sense of waterfalls that were originally inside the Disneyland version, but what they have done with this space is very much as colorful as the original Disneyland Rainbow Caverns, if not more than the original. It is just truly strong hues of lights that have been thrown onto these stalactites and so forth, and it is very, very beautiful. And then as you come to the top of the lift, it all changes and goes to a deep red. And as you go, as the caverns go to this menacing red, water spurts from the top, and then you emerge outside of the falls. The new cavern scene is really terrific, and got some images to look at. The pools down below are very cool. It really is very, very much an improvement to the original. Now you start heading through, and in the first of the drops, you start moving around the mountain, and the last portion of it goes through the tumbleweed scene. And there you see kind of the whole thing in sort of a flash flood detail. The problem with the tumbleweed scene is you can't really see much of it while you're hurling through on the mine train. The place to see the tumbleweed town is when you're aboard the Walt Disney World Railroad and it's just coming out of the Frontierland station. That's a great time to see it. Unfortunately, because of all the construction, the railroad is only operating between Main Street and Tomorrowland, so you don't really get to see that scene and appreciate the details that are there. From there, you go up the second lift, and you go through the same curls that continue, mostly curls that go to your right, and then one at the end that goes to your left. And then it comes into the third lift, which is the new ending scene. Now, to understand this, the old one was kind of this sound of an earthquake, and sometimes you'd have some lanterns that might be shaking, a little bit of light in there. It was not impressive. A number of years ago, Disneyland improved its ending scene by doing a whole lot of work with projection that kind of give you a sense that the mine has been detonated, and that the detonation's ropes that would lead to the dynamite were on fire, and then the whole thing kind of exploded, and then you merged outside the tunnel just in time. And that is a very cool and impressive, and probably more impressive than what I'm going to describe to you. The challenge is that I would say about a third of the time I've been on the Disneyland version over many years, elements or the total element wasn't working very well. It didn't always seem to happen consistently. So I guess that may be the reason why they chose to build a new end scene for the Walt Disney World version. Here what you see is veins of gold, and they seemed to be done almost like with fiber optics, and you could see it into the rock, and it all kind of weaves and kind of directs you forward. And then, lo and behold, as you come toward the top of the lift, the mother lode of all gold appears in this big, massive form, this big, huge piece of gold rock. And with it, I think the funny part, with it comes this chorus, oh, kind of emphasizing the gold reveal. I thought it was too funny to me. And it's very impressive, much better than what it was at Walt Disney World. Again, maybe the other one's a little more exciting at Disneyland, but I do think the way they've done this, it will be more consistent in its delivery. The biggest challenge isn't the new ending scene. The biggest challenge is what happens after. And I've heard Tony Baxter talk about this. The challenge is there's something about the design, and mind you, this is as I think Mark talked about it, this is the first train to really use a CAD system to design, perhaps. Although there was something being used with Space Mountain a couple of years prior, but I think they had advanced the development, certainly. And yet, what they couldn't quite see is that the train, when it comes out of the third lift, it's always slow to gather steam. And then when it finally does and kind of does the big sweep around what was the river, when it does that, the ride is kind of suddenly over. And by the time you get to the dinosaur bones, it's just kind of done. And so it's a little disappointing. That has been improved at Tokyo Disney, and it's been vastly improved at Disneyland and Paris. And it's the wildest ride in the wilderness, especially at Magic Kingdom. So all together, it is a great refurbishment, and I think it fits very well the refurbishments that went on to Buzz Lightyear, which I did again for, I believe, a third time the other day, which had its finally had Buzz Lightyear and a newly refurbished Viewmaster, kind of showing images of what Buzz was trying to explain to you. That was really well done, and the whole of that ride has been really well done. I also love the refurbishment that came to the Country Bear Jamboree. Although I should say at this point that a week or two ago when I went on it, it had been 6 weeks. We had gone on it about 2 months ago, and Teddy Bear didn't come down from the ceiling. The song still had her voice, but it was just Wendell singing and no Teddy Bear. And it's gone on for about 6 weeks. I hope it's been improved. I didn't get a chance to see it this week, but I really hope that's been approved because I think altogether that refurbishment has been incredible as well. I see some really good things happening here at Magic Kingdom that makes the entire day so much more enjoyable. And I think they're on a good run. It's just we got a lot more to go, and you got to keep up the attractions that you build. So all that considered, really do recommend that next time you're at the Magic Kingdom, go and check out Big Thunder Mountain. Now, if you like this kind of nerdy conversation about all things Disney, then you have got to check out my newest offering. For over a year, I've been capturing and sharing stories of Disneyland while creating a new online tool for you to explore all of them in one place. It's called Disneyland Insights, Inspiration, Ideas, and Magic for You and your organization. As I talked about before with Mark and I, this interactive multimedia experience looks at leadership. It looks at an organizational culture. It looks at providing a superior customer experience. It is a unique app experience and really has some stories, models, scores of videos, hundreds of photos, and just really is an amazing thing to check out and look at. So do check out Disneyland Insights, Inspiration, Ideas, and Magic for You and your organization. Now, if you are looking for something more traditional, check out A Century of Powerful Disney Insights, 100 Years, the Walt and Roy Disney Years, The Wonderful World of Customer Service at Disney, and Disney Leadership in You. By the way, my fourth book that I have a link to on my Disney Insights page is Lead with Your Customer, which is not only written by myself, but my partner, Mark David Jones. So check that book out, as well as it highlights not only Disney best practices, but the best practices of over 100 different organizations. Well, thanks for joining us for this podcast. Know that, as in the title of my organization, Performance Journeys, it's as much about the journey as it is about performance. So find the second star to the right and keep going on straight till you reach it. Follow the compass of your heart and know that with a smile and a song, a little faith, effort, and pixie dust, your dreams can come true. After all, if we can dream it, we can do it. Until next time, bright suns. We'll see ya real soon.